so much of the whole vibe of this subgenre of working is sort of like employers are suckers and we're going to take advantage of them.
Right.
And I'm going to get rich off this, 4 times faster than I would have otherwise. So yeah, I mean, it's taking advantage and, all the consequences that come out of that. I mean, there's a lot of exposure to these folks when they start doing this.
Good morning, HR. I'm Mike Coffey, president of Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. And this is the podcast where I talk to business leaders about bringing people together to create value for shareholders, customers, and the community. Please follow, rate, and review Good Morning HR wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at goodmorninghr.com. And welcome to our Thanksgiving Day episode. Maybe you're listening as you cook your turkey. Maybe you're having your second piece of pumpkin pie, or if you're with your extended family, your third glass of Boone's Farm that was your cousin Darlene's contribution to the Thanksgiving meal. But because it is Thanksgiving, it's the last Thursday of the month. It also means it's time for us to talk about miscellaneous HR topics in the news or elsewhere, just like the Pilgrims did. And I'm today joined by my favorite, not a turkey, Steve Peglar. Steve is the principal consultant at HR Strategies of Texas, based in Austin, where he brings his 3 decades of experience across all aspects of human resources and people leadership to clients across the state. Welcome to Good Morning HR, Steve, for your third time.
Well, gobble, gobble. Happy Thanksgiving, Mike, and everybody else, and happy to be back for a third time.
So I know you're so grateful to be here, but you've got a lot to be thankful for. And I know you've shared a lot about it publicly. So you had a pretty serious medical condition earlier this year that, makes me thankful that you're here as you pulled through it. Do you want to share a little bit about that? I think it's pretty amazing.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And yes, I'm thankful to be on the show again, but I'm thankful to be here. I actually had a liver transplant back in February. I'd had an autoimmune bile duct liver disease for over 20 years. I've known about it almost that entire time and never gave me any problems. And then all of a sudden it did. And yeah, I have used parts inside me now. Actually, more specifically, I have my awesome life-saving brother-in-law, Chris's liver, or a big chunk of it. He actually donated 70% of his liver to me, and he's doing great, by the way. If you don't know, the liver is the only human organ that can regenerate, and therefore you can actually donate part of your liver to somebody else that needs it. Pretty miraculous thing, and combined with modern science, it's just, I'm still here. And so thank goodness for him and everybody else that was involved through the process. But it happened. I made a very quick recovery, feel great, better than ever. Oh, and by the way, your liver grows back very fast. He was back at work in 2 weeks and he never missed a beat. And I was up walking around the next day. So it's amazing what modern science can do. But yes, all that to say, very thankful to be here. And by the way, if you're not an organ donor, you should be. Please sign up to do that.
Go sign up and do that.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty amazing brother-in-law. I got to say, I mean, I once gave my brother-in-law $5 and that's probably the most he's ever going to get from me. So,
I mean, you just wait. You never know.
Yeah.
It might be an internal organ later. So.
And speaking of unexpected gifts, earlier this month, federal court in the Eastern District of Texas overturned the Department of Labor's overtime rules. So you may remember that earlier this year, in July, we had salary limit for being classified under FLSA as an exempt employee was raised, and it was set to raise again in 2025. And following recent federal Supreme Court decisions, federal judge in East Texas basically said, you ain't got that power. You're overreading into the law, DOL. You don't have the power to set a salary threshold for, because it's not in the law. And if Congress wants to change the law, they can change the law, but that's not an administrative court's decision. So it's been, it's been all over the HR conversation for the last year. How do we do this? What are we going to do about these managers who are only making $32,000 a year, and we're calling them exempt, and now we got to raise the threshold twice to get, to maintain that exempt status. How often were you hearing from clients about their concerns about the DOL stuff?
Well, yeah, last year or earlier this year, I was hearing quite a bit. But, as it turns out, once people really started looking at their workforce and really understanding how they're classified, what they're being paid, potential changes necessary, anecdotally, I did not see the impact that you would think was out there. And it may be the types of clients I work with or the industries I work with that I just didn't really see too much of an impact. Yeah, I mean, it's a huge deal in the HR world and the employment law world. I am fairly sure it's going to be the more, relegated to certain industries. I mean, I'm seeing stuff out there from, trade associations and lobbyists connected with retail and hospitality, food service, that kind of thing. And, they're happy about it, and they've got all kinds of reasons why they are, everything from, well, gosh, now we can actually, their status won't be lowered. They're still going to get to be an exempt employee, and we can actually afford benefits for them now, kind of thing. So, yeah, and for those people that actually did, make a salary change here and there as needed for folks, at this point, what do you do? I mean, that's the big question. Personally, I think for employee relations' sake, I don't think I would do much of anything. But legally, sure, you have the right to, kick them back down. With regard to their pay.
Change their pay and put them back to, or put them back to exempt if you just moved them to non-exempt, which is probably where a lot of them were really anyway.
Yes.
And where I'm seeing it, because we don't do a lot in my businesses, we don't do a lot in retail in those areas. Where I'm seeing it are nonprofits, and that may, in my opinion, it may be the one place where having that really low exemption makes sense. Mm-hmm. People that go to work for nonprofits are mission driven by and large, especially if they get into the leadership end. And these small nonprofits that don't have big endowments, maybe it makes sense to say because if you move people to exempt status, it's almost a way of giving them flex time, which the Fair Labor Standards Act doesn't let us do. But if you're in a nonprofit or something like that, where you're doing weird hours and you've got events and all of that, and if somebody can qualify for exempt status, it probably makes some sense there. They know what they're getting into, right? And they would always, we always want more money. But the other thing I've heard from employers and seen in some of the discussions online is, well, all we did when we moved them from non-exempt, when we saw what we were going to have to increase the pay, that wasn't feasible, especially with the pay increase that was coming in 2025. We just moved them to hourly right off we just said, okay, you're hourly and you can't work over 40, or you can work up to 45 and we'll still be paying you basically the same thing with your new hourly rate. And that's probably where a lot of these people needed to be anyway, because like I said, if you really take the DOL's test about whether somebody really qualifies for the white collar exemption or even administrative exemption, often they really don't. And so, just calling them, just saying they supervise or they manage a process doesn't make them exempt. So,
yeah. What you said about sort of the pseudo flex time aspect of it, I mean, that can be a big deal for folks. And, some people, there's also sort of the dynamic of mindset of being an exempt employee versus a non-exempt employee. And even though there's so many advantages to being a non-exempt employee, obviously, some people don't think there are. And sometimes it's a misconception.
So, yeah, I feel for the employers who have already communicated, and most of them probably have, to those non-exempt employee or those exempt employees that they're getting a raise effective January 1, so they would be up under the second threshold. Now they've either got to walk that back, which, like you say, that's a harsh thing to tell somebody, or they're just going to stay in it, and their salary bands are going to be screwed up for people who are doing a lot of times very similar work but don't manage people, things like that, and they're making an hourly rate, and you're going to have to figure out how do you compensate for those things. So, but every culture is different. Every set of employees is different. What their expectations and what they want from their employers are different. And so what do you do? I mean, under the law now, you can pretty much do what you want to do as far as you're meeting the old standards, but you got to really think about what it's going to mean to those employees how they're going to respond to it and what they're going to think about their employer. What's it going to do to your engagement?
Well, and again, I know this is new, but I haven't had anybody, and I work with a pretty wide variety of folks. So I haven't heard anything about people cutting pay. I just have not heard that yet. And so not even, hey, can you walk me through this? Let's talk about this. Nothing like that. So not it won't happen. Again, I know it's new, but
and as soon as the lawsuit was filed, my advice to anybody was go ahead and make your plans.
Yeah.
But there's no reason to tell your employees about they're getting a raise in January.
Right.
There's no reason, why roll this out? This is something that's always litigated, and there's always a better than even chance that the courts are going to do something about it. So just hold on to it, sit on your hands, and then, Happy New Year, you got a raise. Boom.
That's right.
That makes it easy, right?
And from a bigger picture standpoint, I mean, with the, change in regimes here coming up, I certainly don't think this isn't really going to come up again so quickly like it has. And at least, in favor of the employee, I don't think. So, that's my opinion on that, but we shall see, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, and speaking about employee engagement, there was a Glassdoor survey that came out this month of 3,400 professionals. And according to the survey, 65% of the respondents said they felt stuck in their current role. And it also pointed out in the article that the September quit rate has dropped down to 1.9%. So people aren't quitting their jobs, but they feel stuck. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, I have spent a lot of time on Reddit lately, and it's not the real world. Social media is not the real world. Reddit's not the real world. But there is at least some subpopulation of employees who definitely feel like they can't find other work. The other jobs just aren't available, even though unemployment is still high, but there's 7.4 million open jobs, but we got a giant skills gap in the country right now. And so people feel stuck in their role. And I think COVID did a lot to us, right? I mean, how many people they see their friends working from home and they want to work from home. And so that makes you feel stuck. I mean, I can't go get another job. I can't find a remote job. But if you look on job postings or on the Facebook HR groups and all those things, you see people looking for work who are saying, oh yeah, I want this job and I want to make this much money. Oh, and it also has to be fully remote. And so if you're not getting exactly what you want, then maybe you feel stuck. What's your take?
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned quite a few points there that I'll try to touch on as best I can, but the whole post-COVID world, I think we've really underestimated, at least a lot of us, what an impact that really did have. I mean, what I'm seeing out there, with clients I work with, and then beyond that, just, the social media that I see, it almost seems like there is a completely different sort of take on the employer-employee relationship now. Prior to 2019, you never saw as many, again, this is anecdotal, maybe not the real world sort of approach here, but, pushback against employers, against the workplace in general, just less trust of the workplace, less trust of folks that would normally be in authority, and it just really seems very prevalent. And it also, yeah, I mean, the job market's weird right now. I agree. And everything I'm reading too says people are not happy still, but this persists, even though, yeah, people are out trying to get jobs. They're trying to, like they always have, get ahead and advance in their careers. And if they're not happy wherever they are, they want to try to leave. The numbers show that people aren't leaving. They are staying put, but that sentiment, that sort of that negative take on the employer-employee relationship really still seems to be there. At least that's what I'm seeing. And, and again, so much of this has to do with COVID. I mean, our world changed really quick for quite a while in a serious way. Another thing you're hearing, popular thought now is, well, everyone's returning to the office. That's just, the work from home, remote work thing's a thing of the past. I mean, not in my experience. I work with a lot of clients, smaller to mid-sized companies that most of them, people work remotely, and a lot of people work remotely. And people that you thought, maybe they would go back to an office, they haven't. And they haven't been pushed either. So that's what I've seen. And just to kind of come back at you there with a few more angles, I'll throw it back to you. Any thoughts on any of that?
Well, there are people quitting, and according to that article on MSN, we'll have the links in the show notes, 17% of the people who switched jobs took a pay cut. That tells me they were leaving circumstances where they were really unhappy. They weren't just stuck. They were truly unhappy. And it's not necessarily because it was a bad employer. They wanted to do something different. I think COVID brought about in the workforce, it diminished their willingness to do things they didn't think were valuable, that didn't bring them personal meaning. And so I've got professional friends who are my age in their 50s who've done career shifts and taken the same, a lateral pay cut, pay or even a pay cut to do something completely different. And I kind of get it. I mean, I love what I do. And, I just went through that phase when I was in my 20s and I had a corporate job and I said, screw this, I'm not going to do this. And I went out on my own. So I think maybe that's part of it, that people are just not willing to put up with something they don't, in those kind of roles. But I think the other part of it maybe, and I think this is where employers really need to pay attention, is what are we doing? We've got money sunk in these employees. I roll my eyes when employers say employees are our most valuable asset, because first of all, they're not your asset.
No.
They can get up and walk. Your assets don't get up and walk their assets right out the door whenever they want to, right? Okay. They're not assets. They are, and when you look at them as assets, as cogs in a machine, I think you're really making a mistake. But you've got to incentivize them to stay here. So you've got to understand why they're there and what do they want. And maybe it's just maybe it's cross training into another area. Maybe they never even want to do that job. But if you've got some time and you've got the bandwidth, to let them cross train, let them just be deeper, more connected with what the organization's doing, that may connect them. But the other thing is and it's the good old good morning HR drinking game. But you've got to train your managers to be good leaders. Just because they were good at that job doesn't mean they're going to be good managers. And people want to work for, they want to take orders from people they respect and that they trust. And that's leadership's problem. So I think there's a whole bunch here. And I think there is, a lot of people got a lot of money for 12 or 18 months that they didn't earn during COVID.
Well, that was a long time ago, though.
Yeah, we say it was a long time ago, and the money's gone now.
Sure, yeah.
But I think the mindset may not be gone. That we were handed this, and when you hear about companies who made profit during COVID, well, good for them. That's what the companies are there to do. I'm not against that, but a lot of employees got money, but their expectation is that somehow that maybe that lifestyle is not there. So I think it's a whole bunch of different issues.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what kind of impact those, subsidies or whatever they were, 4 years ago now. I really am very, very much of the opinion that, people got a taste of what we can get done in different ways than we had ever before. And that mindset, even though, companies, I guess, drug people back to the office or however you want to describe it. I mean, that mindset's still there. And a lot of companies, maybe talk tough, and at the end of the day, they didn't follow through. And people hear about that, and people understand in a broader culture that's, wow, there's all kinds of ways to approach work and to get the job done, whatever the job is. But I agree with you. Back when you mentioned the whole employees are our greatest asset, I've never liked that term. It's not true. Employees are humans. They're not assets, and they're very unpredictable, or can be very unpredictable. So yeah, absolutely.
And let's take a quick break. Good Morning HR is brought to you by Imperative, bulletproof background checks with fast and friendly service. At Imperative, we have 3 core values, one of which is always act in the best interest of our client. To ensure we do that, we focus on keeping 3 promises to our clients. First, we choose our team's competencies over technology, AI, or algorithms. Our research and the information we provide our clients is always guided by our professional analyst, augmented by, but never substituted with, technology. And second, because our processes are thorough, our compliance is strict, and our staff cares, our clients can fearlessly take action based on the information we provide. Finally, when the phone rings or the email chimes, our team answers and solves our clients' issues immediately with fast and friendly service. These are our promises to our clients, and it would be an honor to extend them to you. You can learn more about how Imperative serves our clients at imperativeinfo.com. If you're an HRCI or SHRM certified professional, this episode of Good Morning HR has been pre-approved for 1/2 hour of recertification credit. To obtain the recertification information, visit goodmorninghr.com and click on Recert Credits. Then select episode 176 and enter the keyword Reddit. That's REDDIT. And if you're looking for even more recertification credit, check out the webinars page at imperativeinfo.com. And now back to my conversation with Steve Peglar. And speaking of employees who have different expectations than what most employers want, there is a whole section. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Reddit, the little different groups on Reddit are called subreddits. And these are just conversation, old style bulletin boards, for those of you Gen Xers out there who remember that stuff. And these are just conversation groups, but there's a whole group called Overemployed. And these are people that are working remote and have multiple jobs, sometimes as many as 3 jobs that they're allegedly doing at the exact same time. And there are even educational things on this Reddit subreddit about how to have multiple jobs, and a lot of them are technical jobs apparently, but they're jobs where maybe to get the work done they only need to work 2 or 3 times, 2 or 3 hours a day, and they're finding 2 or 3 or 4 of those jobs. And then they have problems. And what's really funny is when they get mad and post on this group that they had to attend a meeting on Zoom with their supervisors at a time that they were supposed to be working on something else for employer number 2 or employer number 3. But I think this is, we've encountered it doing background checks on a couple of occasions where we would run the work number or somehow in another way identify that this person didn't leave their previous employer, that they have a current employer that they didn't list on their application process or on their resume. And I mean, there's a lot of instructions on that out there on how to get past all these things. Have you encountered this very much? It's kind of mind-boggling to me, but it seems to clearly be a phenomenon out there.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with it, and I'm in Austin, and it's very tech-oriented people here, and there's lots of these kind of folks that could do that kind of, I'm going to call it shady, sort of employment practice there. Yeah, I'm familiar with it, and I've even seen the resources that are out there for folks like this. I mean, at first look, for me, it really seems like almost like a life hack thought up by some smart tech nerds somewhere that maybe had, less than stellar ethics. I don't know. But basically it's also kind of tied to that FIRE movement, that, financial independence movement, because, and you don't have to look very far to find memes and social media posts about people that do this and claim, gosh, I'm a software engineer, I'm working for 4 companies, and I'm making over $1 million a year. Maybe legitimately so. Interestingly enough, just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a friend who, she is a senior leader in a very well-known international tech firm that we've all heard of here in Austin. And I was asking her about this, what would you do if you found out somebody on your team was doing this? And the answer is they would be immediately terminated. It is a thing in that world. She confirmed that there are people that do this. It is kind of viewed as being unethical in a lot of companies. And as a matter of fact, her company even has a policy against it. So, and that it goes a little further than a moonlighting policy. We're not talking about moonlighting. It's often described that way, but we're talking about, hop off one Zoom call with, one company and hopping on another with another. And there's a lot
and this employer's paying you for your full-time attention, your 8 hours a day. Yeah.
Well, and it is, there's a lot of sneaking around, and the resources that this community has, it kind of teaches you how to sneak around. I mean, there's a lot out there, you're the expert on background checks on how to evade these, potential checks into your pay history and anything else that you might be able to look up on somebody that could be detrimental, but how to get around it. Again, how to hack it. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned at the beginning that these are primary tech roles. That's what I see. I don't know if there's too many other professions or lines of work where you could do this. Maybe like creative professionals of some kind. But even then, why not just be a freelancer? But then,
right.
I don't know. But that's not what I do.
And I think it also boils down to, again, a leadership and a management issue. If every employee has a number or metrics and you're really measuring their output and there are things that they're really supposed to be doing and you're gauging their utilization, you're giving them enough work that it really should take 80% of their time to, that you're paying them for to get the job done, then they won't have the bandwidth to do this, or their performance will slip. And I think a lot of this can be racked up to lazy management. Mm-hmm. And or just inexperienced management. They don't know what to do. They don't have systems in place. They don't have clear deadlines. They let people, they let deadlines slide and without real explanations. I think that a lot of it boils down to leadership, because as much as we want leaders to, make people, warm and fuzzy about being at work and how great it is to work here, they also need to hold people accountable, and employees, want to know explicitly what the expectations are. So if you set the bar this low and you really expect somebody to sit there at their desk 40 hours a week and only work 15 of it, then you're probably setting yourself up as an employer for that. Or if you're not measuring them and you're not measuring their productivity, then you've got a problem. We did have a client who, large software client, they procured another company, and they saw the CEO of this company was watching, the other CEOs on LinkedIn of his competitors, just, as one does. And the CEO of the other company said, hey, we welcome Joe Smith or whatever to our company. And this is kind of one of the things they always do on LinkedIn. And they tagged him and put his photo on there. And the CEO of the software company said, this guy works for the company we just acquired. And there are and this other company is a direct competitor.
Yeah.
So now this guy's working for a direct competitor. He's holding down 2 jobs, and it's got at a pretty high level position. And so, the record scratch, and they say stop, hit the brakes, and that called us and said, hey, can you verify? And that was just a matter of picking up the phone saying, hey, I want to do an employment verification. Yes, he still works here.
Yeah.
And, employment date of, 3 months ago or whatever. So it happens.
Yeah. And they, and their resource material is going to give you a bunch of tips on how to hibernate your LinkedIn or do something to it to kind of lock it so there's no, nothing funny shows up there or suspicious. But, in these tech startups, a lot of them, they want a job done. They want an amount of code produced or something. And they may not care that you check in every morning for, a stand-up call or something. But then again, if they were smart, they'd be using contractors on one hand. In this world, these folks get hired as W-2 employees by multiple companies. Now, throw it back at the company and the manager, like you said, holding people accountable, but the company itself for, not, I don't know, and I'm not here to solve the problem, but there's, this could potentially be, especially when it comes to, intellectual property and confidentiality. I mean, you wouldn't want somebody out there, doing a project for your competitor and you're paying them money, not the fact that you're paying them while they're doing competitors' work, but the fact that they've got your information, your institutional knowledge. And so that's really scary. And it seems like it would really open people up to potential legal liability and exposure.
Well, and another thing, another practice, and I'm sure you've heard employers say it. Yeah, we don't verify previous employment because you never get any good information. Well, you know what? Date of hire, title, and date of termination is a great lie detector test.
Yeah.
And if, the employees, either way, if they're filling gaps in their employment by extending dates or just making up out of whole cloth, we see more people lying about their employment history than we see lying about their criminal history in our background check side.
Wow.
And so if people, if they were all honest, I'd be out of work, right? I'd have a straight job myself. But just verifying employment, doing those basic things. And one of the things that the overemployed subreddit says is, oh, well, you always list, if you list that you work for someplace and, to cover the second employment and you say something, you list another employer, then what you say is you worked for a staffing agency. And when the staffing agency says they've never heard of you, the employers will just move on because the recruiters are too lazy to try to track it down or follow up. I don't doubt that that's true sometimes, that, people listen to their, they give them credit and it's, oh, okay. Yeah.
So, so much of the whole vibe of this subgenre of working is sort of like employers are suckers and we're going to take advantage of them.
Right.
I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And I'm going to get rich off this, 4 times faster than I would have otherwise. So yeah, I mean, it's taking advantage and, all the consequences that come out of that. I mean, there's a lot of exposure to these folks when they start doing this.
And it ties back to what we were talking about with that Glassdoor survey too, right? People are, a lot of the justification as well, the employers are, they're not giving us what we want in the workplace. They're not paying us fairly, or they're not, we're not growing, or we're not getting what we want from the employment context. So we're not going to give them what they want. We're just going to, we're justified. And I mean, the private investigator, Mike, who's having all the training on fraud detection and all that, that's the first thing somebody needs to commit an offense is often they'll find the justification to do it, and so they'll point it back at the employer. So as an employer, you're doing a lot better off if you can make your employees not have that feeling towards you and your leadership, but then also manage them and hold them accountable.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, I know you have turkey to go eat, so I'm going to we'll wrap it up there. There's so much more we could talk about, and readers, listeners, let me know. Did you like the Reddit conversation? It's a dystopian view of the workplace when you get on Reddit, but I think it's kind of interesting. I think there's things we can learn as employers. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me once again.
And thank you for listening. You can comment on this episode or search our previous episodes at goodmorninghr.com. Rob Upchurch is our technical producer, and you can reach him at robmakespods.com. And thank you to Imperative's marketing coordinator, Marianne Hernandez, who keeps the trains running on time. And I'm Mike Coffey. As always, don't hesitate to reach out if I can be of service to you personally or professionally. I'll see you next week, and until then, be well, do good, and keep your chin up. Have a great Thanksgiving.